Alrighty, we're back. Ah, Warren is back again too. I missed me too. I missed being able to talk last week. Um, my voice is as it is. My voice is probably like half an octave deeper, but we'll deal with it. Um, I forget where I had planned to get to today. Let's see. So, welcome back to Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggith. Sorry about last week. I was sick. Badly. If there are any awkward pauses, that is probably me having to lean to the side to hack up lung gunk. Hopefully, I will be fast enough on the mute button to deal with those as they come. Otherwise, you've been warned. Shouldn't be an issue. It's been pretty good lately. Where are you? There you are. I just want to slide in. Auxiliary. Yeah, there we go. Click. Okay, so this cover. Here we go. Peter, in the words of Watts himself, another publisher that managed to release Behemoth as a single volume. Not that it made much difference, admittedly. Judging by the Amazon reviews, Wellen tanked in Germany, too. In fact, none of my books seem to go over especially well in Deutschland. I wonder why Heine keeps buying them. I don't actually know how that publisher is pronounced. Heyne. It's not Heine. That's could be Heine. Whatever. Anyway, that's what Watts has to say on that. I had some little love note. Oof, strep is awful. My whatever bug I had presented some symptoms similar to strep in that I had a really, really aggrieved throat. Um, but also my taste buds eroded away, and not all my taste is back. This is not the kind you get from the Rona, where it's like, oh, actual neurological damage. This is like my taste buds literally said, abandon ship and sloughed off. It was the net effect was that of having drunk like I don't know a pint of scalding hot water. It was really weird. I had not drunk a pint of scalding hot water. That's kind of what happened. Oh, right. Somebody had asked a question. Weavatron Observatory commented, please reconsider. This is about authority and basically the Southern Reach trilogy. Please reconsider waiting. I need your reading of acceptance. I don't know how I'm going to stay sane waiting to find out what happens after they jumped. Pretty please, with all the proverbial toppings you prefer on top. I found your channel due to searching for someone reading Authority. Turns out I was only a few weeks behind from when you started reading it. Love the accents, professional grade performance. Looking forward to your reading of Acceptance. I hope I don't have to accept the fact that I'll have to wait. Would you kindly? And I apologize, Weavatron Observatory, but we are going to bang out this first volume of Behemoth first. Um, on the plus side, this one is relatively short. So call it like a month. I'm already looking at, although we've been, obviously, my schedule's been thrown off by a solid week now. Um, Tentatively, how far did we get the previous time? We got like 50 pages in, and it's like 300 pages. So six streams probably. Um, we'll see what happens. That's the hope anyway. Is we get her done in about 6 streams. Okay. So previously on, um, Clark's alive. Achilles Desjardins is alive. Stuff has gone down in the wonderful wild world of lawbreakers and the Entropy Patrol. More on that later. Let's see. So right now, we skipped World War C, ha ha ha, as in under the sea, between um, the Rifters and the Corpses. The Corpses in this case being the catch-all derogatory term for CEOs and executives, corporate executives who were trying to hide out at the bottom of the ocean to avoid the fallout of killing the world. Um, to aggressively sum that up. So right now, those two factions, the deep sea diver rifters and the corpses, are in an uneasy detente at the moment. And yeah, things are about to get shaken up in that regard. There are hints and signs of Behemoth being present, which there very much was supposed to not be. So, we'll see where that goes. Alrighty. I'm going to get me a quick sip of water here, and we will get cracking. Sorry about the delay. I decided to nearly drown myself on my water. So, good times. Huddle. Rowan's daughter sits on the edge of her bed, aglow with sunny radiance from a light strip on the ceiling. She's barefoot, clad in panties and a baggy t-shirt on which animated hatchetfish swim endless circuits around her midriff. She breathes a recycled mixture of nitrogen and oxygen and trace gases, distinguishable from real air only by its extreme purity. The rifter floats in darkness, her contours limned by feeble light leaking through the viewport. She wears a second skin that almost qualifies as a life form in its own right, a miracle of thermo and osmo regulation, black as an oil slick. She does not breathe. A wall separates the two women, keeps ocean from air, adult from adolescent. They speak through a device fixed to the inside of the teardrop viewport, a fist-sized limpet that turns the fullerene perspex into an acoustic transceiver. You said you'd come by, Alex Rowan says. Passage across the bulkhead leaves her voice a bit tinny. I made it up to 5th level. I was like, holy shit, look at all the bonus points. I wanted to show you around. Scammed an extra headset and everything.
Sorry, Clark buzzes back. I was in before, but you were asleep.
So come in now.
Can't. I've only got a minute or two. Something's come up.
Like what?
Someone got injured, and now the meat cutters are going off the deep end about possible infection.
What infection?
It's probably nothing, but they're talking about a quarantine just to be on the safe side. For all I know, they wouldn't let me back inside anyway.
It'd let him play at being in control of something, I guess. Alex grins. The parabolic viewport bends her face into a clownish distortion. They really, really hate not being in charge, you know? And then, with a satisfaction obviously born less of corpses than of adults in general, it's about time they learned how that felt.
I'm sorry, Clark says suddenly.
They'll get over it.
That's not what I.
The Rifter shakes her head.
It's just. You're 14, for God's sake. You shouldn't be down. I mean, you should be out lecking with some R selector.
Alex snorts. Boys? I don't think so.
Girls, then. Either way, you should be out getting laid, not stuck down here.
This is the best place I could possibly be, Alex says simply. She looks out across 300 atmospheres, a teenage girl trapped for the rest of her life in a cage on the bottom of the frigid black ocean. Lenny Clark would give anything to be able to disagree with her. Mom won't talk about it, Alex says after a while. Still, Clark says nothing. What happened between you guys back when I was just a kid? Oh, that's not a question. Whoops. And welcome to Frank Misers and AE Optical Antenna. Thanks for tuning in. I too am glad I'm feeling better. Where are you? Mom won't talk about it, Alex says after a while. Still, Clark says nothing. What happened between you guys back when I was just a kid? Some of the others shoot their mouths off when she's not around, so I kind of hear things. But Mom never says anything. Mom is kinder than she should be. You were enemies, weren't you? Clark shakes her head, a pointless and unseeable gesture, here in the dark.
Alex, we didn't even know each other existed, not until the very end. Your mom was only trying to stop.
What happened anyway? What I was trying to start? There's so much more than speech. She wants to sigh. She wants to scream. All denied out here, her lung and guts squeezed flat, every other cavity flooded and incompressible. There's nothing she can do but speak in this monotone travesty of a voice, this buzzing insect voice, which again I'm embellishing to give some humanity which otherwise it doesn't necessarily have. Because it's a lot easier to do and less harsh on my throat. For an example,
It's complicated.
her vocoder says, flat and dispassionate.
It was so much more than just enemies, you know. There were other things involved. There was all that wildlife in the wires, doing its own thing.
You can see how that's kind of hard to do for extended periods of time. And we have a lot of conversations in that particular voice because there's underwater people. So, you're just going to have to bear with me and pretend it sounds awful like that or horrible and grating like that. Where were we? Oh, right.
It's complicated, her vocoder says, flat and dispassionate. It was so much more than just enemies, you know. There were other things involved. There was all that wildlife in the wires doing its own thing.
They let that out, Alex insists. They started it, not you. By which she means, of course, adults. Perpetrators and betrayers and the ones who fucked everything up for the next generation. And it dawns on Clark that Alex is not including her in that loathsome conspiracy of elders. That Lenny Clark, Meltdown Madonna, has somehow acquired the status of honorary innocent in the mind of this child. She feels ill at the thought of so much undeserved absolution. It seems obscene. But she doesn't have the courage to set her friend straight. All she can manage is a pale, half-assed disclaimer.
They didn't mean to, kid.
She goes for a sad chuckle. It comes out sounding like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together.
Nobody did anything on their own back then. It was strings all the way up.
The ocean groans around her. The sound resonates somewhere between the call of a humpback whale and the death cry of some mammoth hull buckling under pressure. It fills the ocean. Some of it leaks through Alex's limpet device. She screws up her face in distaste. I hate that sound. Clark shrugs, pathetically grateful for the interruption.
Hey, you corpses have your conferences. We have ours.
It's not that. It's those haploid chimes. I'm telling you, Lenny, that guy's scary. You can't trust anyone who makes something that sounds like that.
Your mom trusts him fine. So do I. I've got to go.
He kills people, Lenny. And I'm not just talking about my dad. He's killed a lot of people. A soft snort. Something else Mom never talks about. Clark coasts over to the perspex, lays one silhouetted hand against the light in farewell.
He's an amateur,
She says, and fins away into the darkness. Incidentally, when I'm doing that more robotic, raspy voice, is that at all comprehensible? Can you actually understand the words being spoken there? Because I don't actually re-listen to these all that frequently. Anyway. The voice cries out from a ragged mouth in the seabed, an ancient chimney of basalt stuffed with machinery. In its youth it spewed constant scalding gouts of water and minerals. Now it merely belches occasionally. Soft exhalations stir the mechanisms in its throat, spinning blades and fluting pipes and spliced chunks of rock and metal that bang together. Its voice is compelling, but unreliable. After Lubin built these chimes, he had to come up with a way to kickstart them manually. So he scavenged the reservoir from a decommissioned desalinator, added a heat pump from some part of Atlantis that never survived the corpse revolt. Open a valve, and hot seawater flows through a tracheotomy hole blasted into the smoker's throat. Lubin's machinery screams aloud, tortured by the scalding current. The summons grinds out, rusty and disharmonious. It washes over rifters swimming and conversing and sleeping in an ocean black as heat death. It resonates through makeshift habs scattered across the slope, dismal bubbles of metal and atmosphere so dimly lit that even eye caps only see in black and gray. See only in black and gray. Uh, It slaps against the shiny bright biosteel of Atlantis, and 900 prisoners speak a little louder, or turn up the volume, or hum nervously to themselves in denial. Some of the rifters, those awake and in range, and still human, gather at the chimes. The scene is almost Shakespearean. A circle of levitating witches on some blasted midnight heath, eyes burning with cold phosphorescence, bodies barely distinguished from shadow. They are not so much lit as inferred by the faint blue embers glowing from the machinery in the seabed. All of them bent, not broken. All of them half balanced in that gray zone between adaptation and dysfunction, stress thresholds pushed so high by years of abuse that chronic danger is mere ambiance now, unworthy of comment. They were chosen to function in such environments. Their creators never expected them to thrive here. But here they are. Here are their badges of office. Jelaine Chen with her pink. Oh boy. Not sure what that was all about. Where were we? But here they are. Here are their badges of office. Jelaine Chen, with her pink, nailless fingers, salamandered back in the wake of childhood amputations. Dmitri Alexander, communal priest bait in those last infamous days before the Pope fled into exile. Kevin Walsh, who freaks inexplicably at the sight of running shoes. Any number of garden variety skitterers who can't abide physical contact. Immolation junkies, self mutilators, and glass eaters. All wounds and deformities safely disguised by the dive skins. All pathology hidden behind a uniformity of shadowy ciphers. They, too, owe their voices to imperfect machinery. Clark calls the meeting to order with a question.
Is Julia here?
She's looking in on Jean.
Nolan buzzes overhead.
I'll fill her in.
Wait, which is Nolan again? Oh, it's Grace Nolan, right? I have a different voice for Grace Nolan. Sugar. Right? That's who it is, maybe? This is the disadvantage of skipping a week. Is you forget. Oh, I'm not looking far enough along. Adoy. Maybe? I'm sorry about this. I think that's Grace Nolan. So
She's looking on Jean.
Nolan buzzes overhead.
I'll fill her in.
How's he doing?
Stable. Still unconscious. Been too long, if you ask me.
Getting dragged 20 clicks with your guts hanging out, it's pretty much a miracle.
Oh, getting dragged 20 clicks with your guts hanging out, it's pretty much a miracle that he's even alive.
Jaeger chimes in.
Yeah.
Nolan says.
Or maybe Sieg is deliberately keeping him under. Julia says.
Clark breaks in.
Don't we have a tap on the telemetry from that line?
Not anymore.
What's Gene still doing in corpse lead anyway?
Chen wonders.
He hates it in there. We've got our own med hab.
He's quarantined.
Nolan says.
Sieg is thinking Behemoth.
Shadows shift at this news. Obviously, not all the assembled are fully up to speed.
Shit.
Charlie Garcia fades into half view.
How's that even possible? I thought.
Nothing's certain yet.
Clark buzzes.
Certain?
A silhouette glides across the circle, briefly eclipsing the sapphire embers on the seabed. Clark recognizes Dale Creasy. This is the first time she's seen him for days. She was starting to think he'd gone native.
Fuck, there's even a chance, he continues. I mean, Behemoth.
She decides to nip it in the bud.
So what if it's Behemoth?
A school of pale eyes turn in her direction.
We're immune, remember?
She reminds them.
Anybody down here not get the treatments?
Lubin's wind chimes groan softly. Nobody else speaks.
So why should we care?
Clark asks. It's supposed to be rhetorical.
Garcia answers anyway. Because the treatments only stop Behemoth from turning our guts to mush. They don't stop it from turning little harmless fish into big nasty motherfucking fish that tear into anything that moves. Jean was attacked 20 clicks away. Lenny, we're moving there. It's going to be right in our backyard.
Jesus. I don't know who Alexander is.
Forget there. Who's to say it hasn't reached here already? Alexander wonders. Nobody's been nailed around here, Creasy says. We've lost some natives.
Creasy waves an arm in a barely visible gesture of dismissal.
Natives don't mean shit.
Maybe we should stop sleeping outside, for a while at least.
Crap to that. I can't sleep in a stinking hab.
Fine, get yourself eaten. Lenny?
Chen. Uh, sorry, this is hard. Also, it's doing my nose in. Ugh.
Lenny?
Chen again.
You've messed with sea monsters before. I never saw what got Jean, Clark says, but the fish back at Channer, they were flimsy. Big and mean, but sometimes their teeth would break on you when they bit. Missing some kind of trace nutrient, I think. You could tear them apart with your bare hands. This thing pretty much tore Jean apart, says a voice Clark can't pin down. I said sometimes, she emphasizes. But yeah, they could be dangerous.
Dangerous felch.
Creasy growls in metal.
Could they have pulled that number on Jean?
Yes,
Says Ken Lubin. He's been here all along, of course. Now he takes center stage. A cone of light flares from his forehead to his forearm. He holds his hand out like a beggar's, its fingers curled slightly around something laying across the palm.
Holy shit.
Buzzes Creasy, suddenly subdued.
where'd that come from?
Chen asks.
Seeger pulled it out of Erickson before she glued him up,
Lubin says.
Doesn't look especially flimsy to me. It is, rather, Lubin remarks. This is the part that broke off, in fact, between the ribs. What, you mean that's just a tip?
Garcia says.
Looks like a fucking stiletto.
Nolan buzzes softly. Chen's mask swings between Clark and Lubin.
When you were at Channer, you slept outside with these mothers? Sometimes, Clark shrugs, assuming this is the same thing, And they didn't try to eat you? They keyed on the light. As long as you kept your lamps off, they pretty much left you alone.
Well, shit.
Creasy says.
No problem, then.
Lubin's headlamp sweeps across the assembled rifters and settles on Chen.
You were on a telemetry run when Erickson was attacked?
Chen nods.
We never got the download, though. So someone needs to make another trip out there anyway. And since Lenny and I have experience with this kind of thing...
His beam hits Clark full in the face. The world collapses down to a small bright sun floating in a black void. Clark raises her hand against the brilliance.
Turn that somewhere else, will ya?
Darkness returns. The rest of the world comes back into dim, dark focus. Maybe I could just swim away, she muses as her eye caps readjust. Maybe no one would notice. But that's bullshit, and she knows it. Ken Lubin has just picked her out of the crowd. There's no easy way to get out of this. And besides, he's right. They're the only two that have been down this road before. The only two still alive, at least. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Fine, she says at last.
Don't worry, I won't have to keep inventing voices for too many more Rifter people. Uh, not for long. Um, let's see, I think I've got two more I've got to come up with a voice for, and then I've got a couple of the corpses I've got to come up with a voice for. We'll figure it out. My throat quality is degrading, so let's see if we can make some headway quick. Zombie. Sorry. Sorry about that. 20 kilometers separate Atlantis. No, that's the name of the chapter, is Zombie. Sorry. Not my voice. 20 kilometers separate Atlantis and Impossible Lake. Not far enough for those who still think in dryback terms. A mere 20 clicks from the bullseye? What kind of safety margin is that? Back on shore, the most simple-minded drone wouldn't be fooled by such a trifling displacement. Finding the target missing, it would rise up and partition the world into a concentric gridwork, relentlessly checking off one quadrate after another until some inevitable telltale gave the game away. Shit, most machinery could just sit at the center of the search zone and see 20 kilometers in any direction. Even in the midwaters of the open ocean, 20 kilometers is no safe distance. No substrate exists there but water itself, no topography but gyres and sietches and Langmuir cells. Langmuir cells? Langmuir, Langmuir cells. Thermoclines and haloclines that reflect and amplify as well as mask. The cavitation of submarines might propagate down vast distances, the minuscule turbulence of their passing detectable long after the vessels themselves are gone. Not even stealthed subs can avoid heating the water some infinitesimal amount. Dolphins and machinery, hot on the trail, can tell the difference. But on the mid-Atlantic ridge, 20 kilometers might as well be 20 parsecs. Light has no chance. The sun itself barely penetrates a few hundred meters from the surface. Hydrothermal vents throw up their corrosive vomit along oozing seams of fresh rock. Seafloor spreading sets the very floor of the world to grumbling, mountains pushing against each other in their millennial game of kick the continents. Topography that shames the Himalayas cascades along a jagged fracture, splitting the crust from pole to pole. The ambiance of the ridge drowns out anything Atlantis might let slip along any spectrum you'd care to name. You could still find a target with the right coordinates, but you'd miss a whole screaming city if those numbers were off by even a hair. A displacement of 20 kilometers should be more than enough to get out from under any attack centered on Atlantis's present location, short of full-scale depth saturation nukes, perhaps. Which wouldn't be entirely without precedent, now that Clark thinks about it. She should know. She and Lubin cruise smoothly along a crack in a fan of ancient lava. Atlantis is far behind. Impossible Lake still clicks ahead. Headlamps and squid lamps are dark. They travel by the dim dashboard light of their sonar displays. Tiny, iconized boulders and pillars pass by on the screens, mapped in emerald. The slightest sensations of pressure and looming mass press in from the scrolling darkness to either side.
Rowan thinks things could get nasty,
Clark buzzes. Lubin doesn't comment.
She figures if this really is Behemoth, Atlantis is going to turn into cognitive dissonance central. Get everybody all worked up.
Still nothing.
I reminded her who was in charge.
And who is that, exactly? Lubin buzzes at last.
Come on, Ken. We can shut them down any time we feel like it.
They've had 5 years to work on that.
And what's it got them?
They've also had 5 years to realize that they outnumber us 20 to 1.
that we don't have nearly their technical expertise on a wide range of relevant subjects, that a group of glorified pipe fitters with antisocial personalities is unlikely to pose much threat in terms of organized opposition. That was just as true when we wiped the floor with them the first time. No. She doesn't understand why he's doing this. It was Lubin more than anyone who put the corpses in their place after their first and last uprising. Come on, Ken. His squid is suddenly very close, almost touching. You're not an idiot. He buzzes at her side. It's never a good time to act like one. Stung, she falls silent. His vocoder growls on in the darkness. Back then, they saw the whole world backing us up. They knew we'd had help tracking them down. They inferred some kind of ground-based infrastructure. At the very least, they knew we could blow the whistle and turn them into a great pulsing bullseye for anyone with lats and longs and a smart torp. A great luminous shark fin swells on her screen, a massive stone blade thrusting up from the seabed. Lubin disappears briefly as it passes between them. But now we're on our own, he says, reappearing. Our groundside connections have dried up. Maybe they're dead. Maybe they've turned. Nobody knows. Can you even remember the last time we had a changing of the guard? She can, just barely. Anyone qualified for the dive skin is bound to be more comfortable down here in dry than in. Okay, let's try that sentence again. She can, just barely. Anyone qualified for the dive skin is bound to be more comfortable down here than in dryback company at the best of times. But a few rifters went topside at the very beginning anyway, back when there might have been some hope of turning the tide. Not since. Risking your life to watch the world end isn't anyone's idea of shore leave. By now, we're just as scared as the corpses, Lubin buzzes. We're just as cut off, and there are almost 1,000 of them. We're down to 58. We're down to 58 at last count. We're 70 at least. The natives don't count. 58 of us would be 58 of us would be any use in a fight, and only 50 could last a week in full gravity if they had to. And a number of those have authority issues that make them unwilling to organize. We've got you, Clark says. Lubin, the professional hunter-killer, so recently freed from any leash but his own self-control. No glorified pipe fitter here, she reflects. Then you should listen to me, and I'm starting to think we may have to do something preemptive. They cruise in silence for a few moments. They're not the enemy, Ken, she says at last. Not all of them. Some of them are just kids, you know. They're not responsible. That's not the point. From some indefinable distance, the faint sound of falling rock. Ken, she buzzes, too softly. She wonders if he can hear her. Yes. Are you looking forward to it? It's been so many years since he's had an excuse to kill someone. And Ken Lubin once made a career out of finding excuses. He tweaks his throttle and pulls away. Yep, parsec as in parts of a second that light can travel, or how far light travels in parts of a second. Anyway, showing off my ignorance for all and sundry. Yes, it is a distance calculation, which is why the Star Wars analogy is, or the Star Wars reference was goofitude.
Actually, no, parsecs. Math course is coming back to me slowly. Oh, that's right. That's right. I used to get these confused with astronomical units because I had a small brain. But yeah, it's apparent parallax motion of the nearest star. It's I think it's how you calculate how far or fast a star system is moving, right? 3.26 light years or 3.09 times 10 to the 13, 10, 1013 kilometers. Yeah. It's been a while. Anyway, yes, it's a measurement of distance, and the Kessel run being done in a fewer amount of time units is great and all, but you couldn't realistically do it in less distance. Unless, of course, hyperspace works funny in the Star Wars universe, and you can actually do it in less distance because of the way. Never mind. I've heard that argument before. Point 0.1 parsec, that's right. I don't see periods when I look at text. Don't mind me. No, no, no. You're good. You're good. Peter Watts would know that. Jeff Vandermeer might not. Peter Watts has a science background. Let's see. Where was I? Oh, right. Trouble dawns like a sunrise, smearing the darkness ahead. Here we go.
Anyone else supposed to be out here?
Clark asks. The on-site floods are keyed to wake up when approached, but she and Lubin aren't nearly close enough to have triggered them. Just us, Lubin buzzes. The glow is coarse and unmistakable. It spreads laterally, a diffuse false dawn hanging in the void. 2 or 3 dark gaps betray the presence of interposed topography. Stop, Lubin says. Their squids settle down beside a tumble-down outcropping, its jumbled edges reflecting dimly in the haze. He studies the schematic on his dashboard. A reflected fingernail of light traces his profile. He turns his squid to port. This way. Keep to the bottom. They edge closer to the light, keeping it to starboard. The glow expands, resolves, reveals an impossibility. A lake at the bottom of the ocean. The light shines from beneath its surface. Clark thinks of a swimming pool at night, lit by submerged spotlights in the walls. Slow, extravagant waves, top-heavy things from some low-gravity planet, break into shuddering globules against the near shore. The lake extends beyond the hazy limits of Rifter vision. It always hits her like an hallucination. Okay, so that was me mentally editing. It always hits her like a hallucination, is what's actually there. Although she knows the pedestrian truth. It's just a salt seep, a layer of mineralized water so dense it lies on the bottom of the ocean the way an ocean lies at the bottom of the sky. It's a major selling point to anyone in search of camouflage. The halocline reflects all manner of pings and probes, hides everything beneath as though there were nothing here but soft, deep mud. A soft, brief scream of electronics. For the merest instant, Clark thinks she sees a drop of luminous blood on her dashboard. She focuses. Nothing. Did you? Yes. Lubin's playing with his controls. This way. He steers closer to the shores of Impossible Lake. Clark follows. The next time it's unmistakable. A brilliant pinpoint of red light, laser bright, flickering on and off within the jagged topography of the dashboard display. The squids cry out with each flash. A dead man alarm. Somewhere ahead, a rifter's heart has stopped. They're cruising out over the lake now, just offshore. Roiling greenish light suffuses Lubin and his mount from below. A hypersaline a hypersaline globule shatters in slow motion against the squid's underside. Light rising through the interface bends in odd ways. It's like looking down through the radium-lit depths of a nuclear waste storage lagoon. I did not emphasize syllables there in a way that I find conducive to understanding what I just read. Let's try that again. Light rising through the interface bends in odd ways. It's like looking down through the radium-lit depths of a nuclear waste storage lagoon. Sure, let's take that. A grid of bright pinpoint suns shine far below that surface, where the surveyors have planted their lamps. The solid substrate beneath is hidden by distance and diffraction. The dead man alarm has stabilized to a confidence bubble about 40 meters straight ahead. Its ruby icon beats like a heart on the its ruby icon beats like a heart on the screen. The squids bleat in sync. So many long E sounds, so little time. There, Clark says. The horizon's absurdly inverted here. Darkness overhead, milky light beneath. A dark spot hangs in the distant, fuzzy interface between. It appears to be floating on the surface of the lens. Clark nudges her throttle up a bit. Wait, Lubin buzzes. She looks back over her shoulder. The waves, Lubin says. They're smaller here than they were back near the shore. Which makes sense, since there's no rising substrate to push the peaks above baseline. They're rippling past in irregular spasms, though, not the usual clockwork procession, and now that she traces them back, they seem to be radiating out from... Shit. She's close enough to see limbs now, attenuate stick-like things slapping the surface of the lake into a local frenzy. Almost as though the rifter ahead is a poor swimmer, in over his head, and panicking. He's alive, she buzzes. The dead man icon pulses, contradicting her. No, Lubin says. Only 15 meters away now, the Enigma erupts, writhing from the surface of the lake in a nimbus of shredded flesh. Too late, Clark spots the larger, darker shape thrashing beneath it. Too late, she resolves the mystery. Meal interrupted. The thing that was eating it heads straight for her. It can't be. She twists not quite fast enough. The monster's mouth takes the squid with room to spare. Half a dozen finger-sized teeth splinter against the machine like brittle ceramic. The squid torques in her hands. Some sharp-edged metal protuberance smashes into her leg with 1,000 kilograms of predatory momentum behind it. Something snaps below the knee. Pain rips through her calf. It's been 6 years. She's forgotten the moves. Lubin hasn't. She can hear his squid bearing in, cranked to full throttle. She curls into a ball, grabs the gas billy off her calf in a belated countermeasure. She hears a meaty thud, hydraulics cough. In the next instant, a great scaly mass staggers against her, batting her down through the boiling interface. Heavy water glows on all sides. The world is fuzzy and whirling. She shakes her head to lock it into focus. The action wavers and bulges overhead, writhing through the shattered refractory surface of Impossible Lake. Lubin must have rammed the monster with his squid. Damage may have been inflicted on both sides. Now the squid's corkscrewing down into the lens, riderless and uncontrolled. Lubin hangs in the water facing an opponent twice his size, half of it mouth. If there are eyes, Clark can't make them out through this wobbling discontinuity. She's slowly falling up, she realizes. She scissor kicks without thinking. Her leg screams as something tears it from the inside. She screams too, a ratcheting torn metal sound. Floaters swarm across her eyes in the wake of the cresting pain. Rises from the lake just as the monster opens its mouth and... Holy shit! Disconnects its jaw right at the base, the mouth dropping open way too fast, and suddenly it's closed again and Lubin's just gone. Nothing to suggest where he went except the memory of blurred motion between one instant and the next. She does perhaps the most stupid thing she's ever done in her life. She charges. The Leviathan turns to face her, more ponderously now, but still with all the time in the world. She kicks with one leg, drags the other like a useless, throbbing anchor. The monster's serrated mouth grimaces, a mangled profusion of teeth, way too many still intact. She tries to duck past, to come up under the belly or at least the side, but it just wallows there, turning effortlessly to face every clumsy approach. And then, through the top of its head, it belches. The bubbles do not arise from any natural openings. They erupt through the flesh itself, tearing their own way, splitting the soft skull from within. For a second or two the monster hangs motionless. Then it shivers, an electric spasm that seizes the whole body. One-legged, Clark gets underneath and stabs its belly. She can feel more bubbles erupt inside as the billy discharges, a seismic eruption of flesh. The monster convulses, dying. Its jaw drops open like some ludicrous flapping drawbridge. The water seethes with regurgitated flesh. A few meters away, the grinning, shredded remains of something in a diveskin settle gently onto the surface of Impossible Lake, within a lumpy cloud of its own entrails. You okay? Lubin's at her side. She shakes her head, more in amazement than reply.
My leg.
Now, in the aftermath, it hurts even more. He probes her injury. She yelps. The vocoder turns it into a mechanical bark. Your fibula's broken, Lubin reports. Diveskin didn't tear, at least.
The squid got me.
She feels a deep, burning chill along her leg. She tries to ignore it, gestures at the billy on Lubin's calf.
How many shots did you pump into that fucker?
3.
You were just gone. It just sucked you right in. You're lucky it didn't bite you in half.
Slurp gun feeding doesn't work if you stop to chew. Interrupts the suction. Lubin pans around. Wait here. Incidentally, that's how I think goblin sharks work, as well as a number of deep sea critters where they inhale you. Not just deep sea critters. There's just a general number of fishy things that do that. So that checks out. Lubin pans around. Wait here. Like I'm going to go anywhere with this leg. She can already feel it stiffening. She profoundly hopes the squids are still working. Lubin fins easily over to the corpse. Its dive skin is torn in a dozen places. Tubes and metal gleam intermittently from the opened thorax. A pair of hagfish squirm sluggishly from the remains. Lopez, he buzzes, reading her shoulder patch. Irene Lopez went native 6 months ago. It's been weeks since anyone's even seen her at the feeding stations.
Well, Lubin says, this answers one question at least. Not necessarily.
The monster, still twitching, has settled on the surface of the lake a little ways from Lopez. It wallows only slightly deeper. You'd have to be some kind of rock to sink in brine this dense. Lubin abandons the corpse in favor of the carcass. Clark joins him.
This isn't the same thing that got Jean, he buzzes. Different teeth. Gigantism in at least 2 different species of bony fish, within 2 kilometers of a hydrothermal vent.
He reaches into the gaping maw, snaps off a tooth.
Osteoporosis, probably other deficiency diseases as well. Maybe you could save the lecture until you straighten that...
Page transition.
Until you straighten that out for me?
She points to where her squid, listing drunkenly, describes small erratic circles in the overhead darkness.
I don't think I'm going to be swimming home with this leg.
He coasts up and wrests the vehicle back under control.
We have to bring it back, he says, riding it down to her. All of it,
with a nod to Lopez's gutted remains.
It's not necessarily what you think,
she tells him. He turns and jackknifes into Impossible Lake, on the trail of his own squid. Clark watches his rippling image kicking hard, fighting against buoyancy.
It's not Behemoth, she buzzes softly. It'd never survive the trip.
Her voice is as calm as such mechanical caricatures can be out here. Her voice is as calm as such mechanical caricatures can be out. Yep, no, I read it right. Her words sound reasonable. Her thoughts are neither. Her thoughts are caught in a loop, a mantra born of some forlorn subconscious hope that endless repetition might give substance to wishes. It can't be, it can't be, it can't be. Here, on the sunless slopes of the mid-Atlantic ridge, facing consequences that have somehow chased her to the very bottom of the world, denial seems the only available option. So, you know that disclaimer I put on these streams for the Rifters trilogy about unpleasant things happening to people and unpleasant people doing unpleasant things? Away we go. Portrait of the Sadist as a Young Boy. Achilles. Oh, this is great. So not all of what I just read, but that's not okay. But you know how you like wake up in the middle of the night screaming something, you have a eureka moment. I had a eureka moment, the perfect justification for why Achilles Desjardins is pronounced Achilles and not Achille. Because the typical French spelling of Achille lacks the S. So there. It's Achilles. I said it before. I'm right, probably, even though he's a Quebecois. Yup. Sticking to it. It's still probably Achille, but I'm still going with Achilles because we're going with Achilles. Portrait of the Sadist as a Young Boy. Achilles Desjardins wasn't always the most powerful man in North America. At one time, he'd been just another kid growing up in the shadow of Mont Saint Hilaire. There's a whole contextual joke there that we're not going to get into. Um, Having lived in proximity to Quebec for many years of my life, I can. I. That's a digression for another time. Uh, he'd just been another kid growing up in the shadow of Mont Saint Hilaire. He had always been an empiricist, though. Remind me to tell you about Saint Louis de Duhaha. He had always been an empiricist, though, an experimenter at heart for as long as he could remember. His first encounter with a research ethics committee had occurred when he was only 8. That particular experiment had involved aerobraking. His parents, in a well-intentioned effort to interest him in the classics, had introduced him to The Revenge of Mary Poppins. The story itself was pretty stupid, but Achilles liked the way the Persinger box had slipped the butterfly-inducing sensation of flight directly into his brain. Mary Poppins had this nanotech umbrella, see? And she could jump right off the top of the CN Tower and float to Earth as gently as a dandelion seed. The illusion was so convincing that Achilles' 8-year-old brain couldn't see why it wouldn't work in real life. His family was rich. All Quebecois families were, thanks to Hudson Hydro. So Achilles lived in a real house, a single stand-alone dwelling with a yard and everything. He grabbed an umbrella from the closet, let it bloom, and, clutching tightly with both hands, jumped off the front porch. The drop was only 1.5 meters, but that was enough. He could feel the umbrella grabbing at the air above him, slowing his descent. Buoyed by this success, Achilles moved on to phase 2. His sister, Penny, 2 years younger, held him in almost supernatural esteem. It was dead easy to talk her into scrambling up the trellis and onto the roof. It took a bit more effort to coax her to the very peak of the gable, which must have been a good 7 meters above ground. But when your big brother, who you idolize, is calling you a chicken shit, what are you supposed to do? Penny inched her way to the apex and stood teetering at the edge, the dome of the umbrella framing her face like a big black halo. For a moment, Achilles thought the experiment would fail. He had to bring out his ultimate weapon and call her Penelope twice before she jumped. There was nothing to worry about, of course. Achilles already knew it would work. The umbrella had slowed him, after all, even during a drop of a measly meter or so, and Penny weighed a lot less than he did. Which made it all the more surprising when the umbrella snapped inside out, whap, right before his eyes. Penny dropped like a rock, landed on her feet with a snap, and crumpled on the spot. In the moment of complete silence that followed, several things went through the mind of 8-year-old Achilles Desjardins. First was the fact that the goggle-eyed look on Penny's face had been really funny just before she hit. Second was the confusion and disbelief that the experiment hadn't proceeded as expected. He couldn't for the life of him figure out what had gone wrong. Third came the belated realization that Penny, for all the hilarity of her facial expression, might actually be hurt. Maybe he should try and do something about that. Lastly, he thought of the trouble he was going to be in if his parents found out about this. That thought crushed the others like bugs under a boot. He rushed over to the crumpled form of his sister on the lawn. "Geez, Penny, are you?" She wasn't. The umbrella's ribs had torn free of the fabric and slashed her across the side of the neck. One of her ankles was twisted at an impossible angle, and had already swollen to twice its normal size. There was blood everywhere. Penny looked up, lip trembling, bright tears quivering in her eyes. They broke and ran down her cheeks as Achilles stood over her, scared to death. "Penny," he whispered,
It's okay, she quavered. I won't tell anyone, I promise.
And, broken and bleeding and teary-eyed, eyes brimming with undiminished adoration for Big Brother, she tried to get up and screamed the instant she moved her leg. Looking back as an adult, Desjardins knew that couldn't have been the moment of his first erection. It was, however, the first one that stuck in his mind. He hadn't been able to help himself. She had been so helpless, broken and bleeding and hurt. He had hurt her. She had meekly walked the plank. I can't talk. She had meekly walked the plank for him, and after she'd fallen and snapped like a twig, she'd looked up at him, still worshipful, ready to do whatever it took to keep him happy. He didn't know why that made him feel this way. He didn't even know what this way was exactly, but he liked it. His willy hard as a bone, he reached out to her. He wasn't sure why. He was grateful that she wasn't going to tell, of course, but he didn't think that's what this was all about. He thought, as his hand touched his sister's fine brown hair, that maybe this was about seeing how much he could get away with. Not much, as it turned out. His parents were on him in the next second, shrieking and striking. Achilles raised his hands against his father's blows, cried, "I saw it on Mary Poppins!" But the alibi didn't fly any more than Penny had. Dad had kicked the shit out of him and threw him into his room for the rest of the day. It couldn't have ended any differently, of course. Mom and Dad always found out. It turned out that the little bump that both Achilles and Penny had under their collarbones sent out a signal when either of them got hurt. And after the Mary Poppins incident, not even the implants were enough for Mom and Dad. Achilles couldn't go anywhere, not even the bathroom, without 3 or 4 skeeters following him around like noisy floating rice grains. Nosy floating rice grains. Sorry. All in all, that afternoon taught him 2 things that shaped the rest of his life. One was that he was a wicked, wicked boy who could never, ever give in to his impulses no matter how good it made him feel, or he would go straight to hell. The other was a profound and lifelong appreciation of the impact of ubiquitous surveillance. Like I said, I'm not exactly kidding around with that particular little disclaimer. Unpleasant shit. Achilles Desjardins, bit of a sick puppy. We had some hints to that in the previous book. We're really gonna get it full bore here. There are in fact little breaks. Like this is kind of like explaining the background of Achilles and what makes him tick, and why the thing that happened at the end of the previous novel is kind of a big deal. You know, just kind of letting him off the leash. Not just being chemically programmed to feel guilt at doing the wrong thing, and always having to serve the greater good, but giving him taking away any fetters he otherwise would have had and just completely removing them. At least as a youth, he could feel guilt. Confidence limits. There are no Rifter MDs. The walking wounded don't generally excel in the art of healing. Of course, there's never been any shortage of Rifters in need of healing, especially after the Corpse Revolt. The Fishheads won that war hands down, but they took casualties just the same. Some died. Others suffered injuries and malfunctions beyond the skill of their own off-the-shelf medical machinery. Some needed help to stay alive. others to die in something less than agony. And all the qualified doctors were on the other side. No one was going to trust their injured comrades to the tender mercies of 1,000 sore losers just because the corpses had the only hospital for 4,000 clicks. So they grafted a couple of habs together 50 meters off Atlantis's shoulder and furnished it with medical equipment pillaged from enemy infirmaries. FiberOp let the corpses' meat cutters practice their art by remote control. Explosive charges planted on Atlantis's hull inspired those same meat cutters to be extra careful in matters of potential malpractice. The losers took very good care of the winners, on pain of implosion. Eventually, tensions eased. Rifters stopped avoiding Atlantis out of distrust, and began avoiding it out of indifference instead. Gradually, the realization dawned that the rest of the world posed a greater threat to Rifters and corpses alike than either did to the other. Lubin took down the charges somewhere during year 3, when most everyone had forgotten about them anyway. The MedHab still gets a fair bit of use. Injuries happen. Injuries are inevitable, given Rifter tempers and the derived weakness of Rifter bones. But at the moment it holds only 2 occupants, and the corpses are probably thanking their portfolios that the Rifters cobbled this facility together all those years ago. Otherwise, Clark and Lubin might have dragged themselves into Atlantis, and everyone knows where they've been. As it is, they only ventured close enough to hand off Irene Lopez and the thing that dined upon her. 2 clamshell sarcophagi, dropped from one of Atlantis's engineering locks on short notice, devoured that evidence and are even now sending their findings up FiberOp umbilicals. In the meantime, Clark and Lubin lie side by side on a pair of operating tables, naked as cadavers themselves. It's been a long time since any corpse dared give an order to a Rifter, but they've acquiesced to Gerenis Seeger's strong recommendation that they get rid of their dive skins. It was a tougher concession than Clark lets on. It's not that simple nudity discomfits her. Lubin has never tripped Clark's usual alarms. But the autoclave isn't just sterilizing her dive skin. It's destroying it, melting it back down into a useless slurry of protein and petroleum. She's trapped, naked and vulnerable, in this tiny bubble of gas and spun metal. For the first time in years, she can't simply step outside. For the first time in years, the ocean can kill her. Whoops, wrong emphasis. For the first time in years, the ocean can kill her. There we go. All it has to do is crush this fragile eggshell and clench. I don't know, something got caught in my in my sinus there. All it has to do is crush this fragile eggshell, fragile eggshell, and clench around her like a freezing liquid fist. It's a temporary vulnerability, of course. New dive skins are on the way, are being extruded right now. Clark just has to hold out another 15 or 20 minutes. But in the meantime, she feels worse than naked. She feels skinned alive. It doesn't seem to bother Lubin much. Nothing does. Of course, Lubin's teleop is being a lot less invasive than Clark's. It's only taking samples. Blood, skin, swabs from around the eyes and anus and seawater intake. Clark's machine is digging deep into the flesh of her leg, displacing muscle and resetting bone and waving its gleaming chopstick arms like some kind of chrome spider performing an exorcism. Occasionally, the smell of her own cauterizing flesh wafts faintly up the table. Presumably, her injury is under repair, although she can't really tell. The table's neuroinduction field has her paralyzed and insensate below the stomach. How much longer? She asks. The teleop ignores her without dropping a stitch. I don't think anyone's there, Lubin says. It's on autopilot. She turns her head to look at him. Eyes dark enough to be called black look back at her. Clark catches her breath. She keeps forgetting what naked really means down here. What is it the drybacks say? The eyes are the windows to the soul. But the windows into rifter souls are supposed to have frosted panes. Uncapped eyes are for corpses. This doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. It looks as though Lubin's eyes have been pulled right out of his head, as though Clark is looking into the wet, sticky darkness inside his skull. He rises on the table, oblivious to his own gory blindness, and swings his legs over the edge. His teleop withdraws to the ceiling with a few disapproving clicks. A comm panel decorates the bulkhead within easy reach. He taps it. Ambient channel. Grace, how are you coming with those skins? Nolan answers in her outdoor voice.
We're 10 meters off your shoulder. And yes, we remember to bring extra eye caps.
A soft buzz. Acoustic modems are bad for background noise sometimes.
If it's okay with you, though, we'll just leave them in the lock and be on our way.
Sure. Lubin's face is expressionless. No problem. Clanks and hisses from down on the wet deck.
There you go, sweetie.
Nolan buzzes. Lubin drills Clark with those eviscerated eyes. You coming? Clark blinks. Any place in particular? Atlantis. My leg. But her teleop is folding up against the ceiling as she speaks, its slicing and dicing evidently completed. She struggles to prop her upper body up on its elbows. She's still dead meat below the gut, although the hole in her thigh has been neatly glued shut. I'm still frozen. Shouldn't the field... Perhaps they were hoping we wouldn't notice. Lubin takes a hand pad off the wall. Ready? She nods. He taps a control. Feeling floods her legs like a tidal bore. Her repaired thigh awakens. A sudden tingling. Oh, yes. There's a line break there, and it just threw me. Her repaired thigh awakens. A sudden tingling swarm of pins and needles. She tries to move it. She succeeds, with difficulty. She sits up, grimacing.
What are you doing out there?
The intercom demands. After a moment, Clark recognizes the voice. Klein. Shutting down the field seems to have caught his attention. Lubin disappears into the wet room. Clark kneads her thigh. The pins and needles persist.
Lenny?
Klein says,
What?
I'm fixed.
No, you're not. The teleop. You have to stay off that leg for at least 6 more hours, preferably 12.
Thanks. I'll take it under advisement. She swings her legs over the edge of the table, puts some weight on the good one, gradually shifts weight to the other. It buckles. She grabs the table in time to keep from keeling over. Lubin steps back into view, a carry sack slung over his shoulder. You okay? His eyes are capped again, fresh as white ice. Clark nods, strangely relieved. Hand me that dive skin. Klein heard that.
Wait a second. You two have not been cleared for... I mean...
The eyes go in first. The tunic slithers eagerly around her torso. Sleeves and gauntlets cling like welcome shadows. She leans against Lubin for support while she dons the leggings. The tingling in her thigh is beginning to subside, and when she tries out the leg again, it takes her weight for a good 10 seconds before giving out. Progress.
Lenny?
Oh, Seeger's voice.
Lenny? Ken? Where are you going?
Seeger's voice this time. Klein's called for reinforcements. We thought we'd come for a visit, Lubin says.
Are you sure you've thought that through? Seeger says calmly. With all due respect.
Is there some reason we shouldn't? Lubin asks innocently.
Lenny's leg.
Beyond Lenny's leg. Dead air in the room. You've analyzed the samples by now, Lubin remarks.
Not comprehensively. The tests are fast, not instantaneous.
And? Anything?
If you were infected, Mr. Lubin, it only happened a few hours ago. That's hardly enough time for an infection to reach detectable levels in the bloodstream.
That's a no, then. Lubin considers. What about our skins? Surely you would have found something on the dive skin swabs. Seeger doesn't answer. So they protected us, Lubin surmises. This time.
As I said, we haven't finished.
I understood that Behemoth couldn't reach us down here, he remarks. Seeger doesn't answer that either at first.
So did I,
She says finally. Clark takes a half hop toward the airlock. Lubin offers an arm. We're coming over, he says. Didn't mention any thought of remorse, just selfish ones. So in this case, he will reveal something that can be taken as a facsimile of remorse. He can understand that there are consequences for actions, or care about consequences for actions, whereas now he is chemically incapable of doing so. He cannot care. He cannot feel the things, the responses to that sort of stimulus that we would, guilt in particular, that we are capable of feeling as socialized animals. Because the receptors for the guilt chemical are basically clogged up, as I recall. It's kind of like what you do. It's actually not wholly dissimilar to how the COVID-19 vaccine works, actually, I think, in its way. There's some conceptual overlap there where the proteins can't latch on properly. Or in this case, the COVID vaccine is detectable, whereas this is the opposite of that. It's a thing.
I believe it.
Half a dozen modelers cluster around workstations at the far end of the concave, running sims, tweaking parameters in the hope that their virtual world might assume some relevance to the real one. Patricia Rowan leans over their shoulders, studying something at one board. Jeremy Seeger labors alone at another. She turns and catches sight of the approaching rifters, raises her voice just slightly in an alarm call disguised as a greeting.
Ken! Lenny!
The others turn. A couple of the less experienced back away a step or two. Wait, does Journey's turn or does Patricia Rowan turn? I think it's Patricia Rowan, yes. Okay. Oh, no. It's Journey's Seeger. Uh,
Ken! Lenny!
the others turn. A couple of the less experienced back away a step or two. Rowan recovers first, her quicksilver eyes unreadable. You should spare that leg, Lenny. Here. She grabs an unused chair from a nearby station and rolls it over. Clark sinks gratefully into it. Nobody makes a fuss. The assembled corpses know how to follow a lead, even though some of them don't seem too happy about it. Jerry says you've dodged a bullet. You've dodged the bullet, Rowan continues.
As far as we know,
Seeger adds,
for now.
which implies there's a bullet to dodge, Lubin says. Seeger looks at Rowan. Rowan looks at Lubin. The number crunchers don't look anywhere in particular. Finally, Seeger shrugs.
D-cysteine and D-cysteine, positive. Pyranosal RNA, positive. No phospholipids, no DNA. Intracellular ATP off the scale. Not to mention you can do an SEM of the infected cells and just see the little fellows floating around in there.
She takes a deep breath.
If it's not Behemoth, it's Behemoth's evil twin brother. Shit, says one of the modelers. Not again.
It takes Clark a moment to realize that he's not reacting to Seeger's words, but to something on the workstation screen. She leans forward, catches sight of the display through the copes of personnel. A volumetric model of the Atlantic basin. Luminous contrails wind through its depths like many-headed snakes, bifurcating and converging over continental shelves and mountain ranges. Currents and gyres and deep water circulation, iconized in shades of green and red, the ocean's own rivers. And superimposed over the entire display, a churlish summary.
Failure to converge. Confidence limits exceeded. Further predictions unreliable. Bring down the Labrador Current a bit more, one of the modelers suggests. Any more and it'll shut down completely, another one says.
So how do you know that it isn't exactly what happened?
When the Gulf Stream...
Just try it, will you? The Atlantic clears and resets. Rowan turns from her troops and fixes Seeger. Suppose they can't figure it out.
Maybe it was down here all along. Maybe we just missed it.
Seeger shakes her head, as if skeptical of her own suggestion.
We were in something of a hurry.
Not that much of a hurry. We checked every vent within 1,000 kilometers before we settled on this site, did we not?
Somebody did, Seeger says tiredly.
I saw the results. They were comprehensive. Rowan seems almost less disturbed by Behemoth's appearance than by the thought that the surveys might have been off. And certainly none of the surveys since have shown anything. She breaks off, struck by some sudden thought. They haven't, have they, Lenny? No, Clark says. Nothing. Right. So, 5 years ago, this whole area was clean. The whole abyssal Atlantic was clean, as far as we know. And how long can Behemoth survive in cold seawater before it shrivels up like a prune and dies?
A week or two, Seeger recites. A month max.
And how long would it take to get here via deep circulation?
Decades. Centuries.
Seeger sighs.
We all know this, Pat. Obviously something's changed.
Thanks for that insight, Jerry. What might that something be?
Christ, what do you want from me? I'm not an oceanographer. Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor, not a... Oh, damn it. Damn it, Pat! I'm a doctor, not an oceanographer.
Excuse me. Seeger waves an exasperated hand at the modelers.
Ask them. Jason's been running that model for semen-sucking motherfucking stumpfucker.
Jason snarls at the screen. The screen snarls back.
Failure to converge. Confidence limits exceeded. Further predictions unreliable.
Rowan closes her eyes and starts again. Would it be able to survive in the euphotic zone, at least? It's warmer up there, even in winter. Could our recon parties have picked it up and brought it back?
Then it would be showing up here, not way over at Impossible Lake.
But it shouldn't be showing anywhere. What about fish? Lubin says suddenly. Rowan looks at him. What? Behemoth can survive indefinitely inside a host, correct? Less osmotic stress. That's why they infect fish in the first place. Perhaps they hitched a ride.
Abyssal fish don't disperse, Seeger says. They just hang around the vents.
Are the larvae planktonic?
Still wouldn't work. Not over these kinds of distances, anyway.
With all due respect, Lubin remarks, you're a medical doctor. Maybe we should ask someone with relevant expertise. Damn it, Jerry, you're a doctor, not an oceanographer. It's a jab, of course. When the corpses were assigning professional berths on the Ark, ichthyologists. Damn it, damn it, Jerry, you're a. Never mind. Ah. When the corpses. It's a jab, of course. When the corpses were assigning professional berths on the Ark, ichthyologists didn't even make the long list. But Seeger only shakes her head impatiently.
They'd tell you the same thing.
How do you how do you know? There's an odd curiosity in Rowan's voice.
Because Behemoth was trapped in a few hot vents for most of Earth's history. If it had been able to disperse inside plankton, why wait until now to take over the world? It would have done it a few 100 million years ago.
Something changes in Patricia Rowan. Clark can't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it's some subtle shift in the other woman's posture. Or perhaps Rowan's contacts have brightened, as if the intel twinkling across her eyes has slipped into fast forward. Pat? Clark asks. But suddenly Seeger's coming out of her chair like it was on fire, spurred by a signal coming over her earbud. She taps her watch to bring it online.
I'm on my way. Stall them.
She turns to Lubin and Clark.
If you really want to help, come with me.
Ah, that's right. Skip pages. Good job. Oh, we're good. What's the problem? Lubin asks. Seeger's already halfway across the cave.
More slow learners. They're about to kill your friend.
Cavalry. And yes, it's pronounced cavalry. Because Calvary is a hill.
It's a geographic location, not a bunch of dudes on horses. There is a huge difference between where the L and the V are positioned.
Sorry, minor pet peeve. Like, there aren't many, like, grammatical trigger warnings that I have, but that's one of them, is mispronouncing cavalry and Calvary. Anyway, where were we? Cavalry. There are lines drawn everywhere in Atlantis, 4-centimeter gaps that circumscribe whole corridors, as if someone had chainsawed through the bulkheads at regular intervals. The gaps are flagged by cautionary bands of diagonal striping to either side, and if you stand astride one of them and look up where it passes overhead, you'll see why. Each contains a drop gate, poised to guillotine down in the event of a hull breach. They're such convenient and ubiquitous boundaries that parties in opposition have always tended to use them as lines in the sand. Parties, like the half-dozen corpses hanging back at the junction, too scared or too smart to get involved. Parties like Hannock Jaeger, dancing restlessly on the far side of the striped line, keeping them all at bay 15 meters upwind of the infirmary. Lubin shoulders through the chicken-shit corpses, Clark hobbling in his wake. Jaeger bares his teeth in greeting. Parties 4 doors down on the left. His capped eyes narrow at their corpse escorts. Clark and Lubin pass. Seeger tries to follow. Jaeger catches her around the throat and holds her there, squirming. Invitation only.
You don't.
Jaeger clenches. Seeger's voice chokes down to a whisper.
You want Jean to die?
Sounds like a threat, Jaeger growls.
I'm his doctor.
Let her go,
Clark tells him. We might need her. Jaeger doesn't budge. Oh, shit, Clark thinks. Is he primed? Jaeger's got a mutation. Word time. Jaeger's got a mutation. Too much monoamine oxidase. Nailed it. Jaeger's got a mutation. Too much monoamine oxidase in his blood. It breaks down the brain chemicals that keep people on an even keel. The authorities tweaked him to compensate, back in the days when they could get away with such things, but he learned to get around it somehow. Sometimes he deliberately strings himself so tight that a sideways glance can send him off the deep end. It gets him off. When that happens, it doesn't matter all that much whether you're friend or foe. Times like that, even Lubin takes him seriously. Lubin's taking him seriously now. Let her pass, Han. His voice is calm and even, his posture relaxed. From down the corridor, a groan, the sound of something breaking. Jaeger snorts and tosses Seeger aside. The woman staggers coughing against the wall. You too, Lubin says to Rowan, who's still discreetly behind the striped line. To Jaeger, if it's okay with you, of course. Shit, I don't give a fuck. Jaeger's fingers clench and unclench as if electrified. Lubin nods. You go on, he says casually to Clark. I'll help Han hold the fort. It's Nolan, of course. Clark can hear her snarling as she nears the medbay. Ah, the little fuckhead's gone and shit himself. She squeezes through the hatch. The sour stench of fear and feces hits her in the face. Nolan. Yes. And she's got Creasy backing her up. Klein's been thrown into the corner, broken and bleeding. Maybe he tried to get in the way. Maybe Nolan just wanted him to. Gene Erickson's awake at last, crouching on the table like a caged animal. His splayed fingers push against the isolation membrane and it just stretches like impossibly thin latex. The farther he pushes, the harder it pulls. His arm isn't quite extended, but the membrane's tight as it's going to go, a mass of oily, indestructible rainbows swirling along lines of resistible force. Fuck, he growls, sinking back. Nolan squats down and cocks her head, bird-like, a few centimeters from Klein's bloody face. Let him out, sweetie. Klein drools blood and spit. I told you he's... Get away from him! Seeger pushes into the compartment as though the past 5 years, as though the past 5 minutes, never happened. She barely gets her hand on Nolan's shoulder before Creasy slams her into a bulkhead. Nolan brushes imaginary contaminants from the place where Seeger touched her. Don't damage the head, she tells Creasy. Could be a password in there. Everybody? Rowan, at least, is smart enough to stay in the corridor. Just calm down. Nolan snorts, shaking her head. Or what, stumpfuck? Are you gonna call security? Are you gonna have us ejected from the premises? Creasy's white eyes regard Seeger from mere centimeters away, a promise of empty and mindless violence set above grinning blibbidabop, bip bip skibbity boo bop bop. Stop! Water time. Creasy's white eyes regard Seeger from mere centimeters away, a promise of empty and mindless violence set above a grinning bulldozer jaw. Creasy, it is said, has a way with women. Not that he's ever fucked with Clark. Not that anyone does, as a rule. Rowan looks through the open hatch, her expression calm and self-assured. Clark sees the plea hidden behind the confident facade. For a moment, she considers ignoring it. Her leg tingles maddeningly. At her elbow, Creasy makes kissy-kissy noises at Seeger, his hand viced around the doctor's jaw. Clark ignores him. What's the deal, Grace? Nolan smiles harshly. We managed to wake him up, but Normie here, an absent punch at Klein's head, put some kind of password on the table. We can't dial down the membrane. Clark turns to Erickson. How you feeling? They did something to me. He coughs. When I was in a coma. Yes, we did. We saved his. Creasy bumps Seeger's head against the bulkhead. Seeger shuts up. Clark keeps her eyes on Erickson. Can you move without it spilling your intestines all over? He twists clumsily around to show off his abdomen. The membrane stretches against his head and shoulders like an amniotic sac. Miracles of modern medicine, he tells her, flopping onto his back. Sure enough, his insides have all been packed back where they belong. Fresh pink scars along his abs complement the older ones on his thorax. Jeremy Seeger looks very much as if she wants to say something. Dale Creasy looks very much as if he wants her to try. Let her talk, Clark tells him. He loosens his grip just slightly. Seeger looks at Clark and keeps her mouth shut. So, what's the story? Clark prompts. Looks like you glued him back together okay. It's been almost 3 days. 3 days? 3 days, Seeger repeats. Her voice is squeezed thin and reedy under Creasy's grip. He was almost disemboweled, and you think 3 days is enough time to recover? In fact, Clark's sure of it. She's seen torn and broken bodies before. She's seen multi-armed robots reassemble them, lay fine electrical webbing into their wounds to crank healing up to a rate that would be miraculous if it weren't so routine. 3 days is more than enough time to drag yourself back outside. Seems, S-E-A-M-S, seems still oozing maybe, but strong enough. And once you're weightless again, and sheltered by the endless black womb of the abyss, you've got all the time in the world to recover. It's something the drybacks have never been able to grasp. What keeps you weak is the gravity. Does he need more surgery? She asks. He will if he isn't careful. Answer the fucking question, Nolan snarls. Seeger glances at Clark, evidently finds no comfort there. What he needs is time to recover, and coma will cut that by 2/3. If he wants to get out of here quickly, that's his best option. You're keeping him here against his will, Nolan says. Why? Rowan begins from the corridor. Nolan wheels on her. You shut the fuck up right now. Rowan calmly pushes her luck. Why would we want to keep him here if it weren't medically necessary? He could rest up in his own hab, Clark says. Outside, even. Seeger shakes her head. He's running a significant fever. Lenny, just look at him. She's got a point. Erickson's flat on his back, apparently exhausted. A sheen of perspiration slicks his skin, almost lost behind the more conspicuous glistening of the membrane. A fever, Clark repeats. Not from the operation? No, some kind of opportunistic infection. From what? He was mauled by a wild animal, Seeger points out, exasperated. There's no end to the kind of things you can pick up from something as simple as a bite, and he was nearly eviscerated. It would be almost inconceivable if there weren't complications. Hear that, Gene? Clark says. You've got fish rabies or something. Fucking A, he says, staring at the ceiling.
So it's your call. Want to stay here, let him fix you? Or trust to drugs and take your chances? Get me out of here, Erickson says weakly. She turns back to Seeger. You heard him. Seeger draws herself up, impossibly, perpetually, insanely defiant.
Lenny, I asked you to come along to help. This is the furthest thing from.
Creasy's fist hits her in the stomach like a wrecking ball. Seeger oofs and topples to the side. Her head hits the bulkhead on the way down. She lies there, gulping breathlessly. Out of the corner of her eye, Clark sees Rowan step forward, then think better of it. She stares evenly at Creasy. Not necessary, Dale.
Iron mighty cunt was just asking for it,
Creasy grumbles. And how's she going to let Jean out of jail if she can't even breathe, you idiot?
Really, Len, what's the big deal?
Really, Len, what's the big deal?
Nolan. Clark turns to face her.
You know what they did to us.
Nolan continues, rising at Creasy's side.
You know how many of us these pimps fucked over, killed even.
Fewer than I did, Clark doesn't say.
I say, if Dale wants to go to town on this stump fuck, let him.
Nolan puts a comradely hand on Creasy's shoulder.
Might go a tiny way to balancing the books, you know.
You say, Clark says quietly. I say different.
Now there's a surprise.
The trace of a smile ghosts across Nolan's face. They stare at each other through their corneal shields. Across the compartment, Klein whimpers. Jeremy Seeger seems to be breathing again at their feet. Creasy looms close at Clark's shoulder, an ominous presence just short of overt threat. She keeps her breathing slow and even. She lowers herself into a squat, carefully, carefully, her bad leg nearly buckling again, and helps Seeger into a sitting position. Let him out, she says. Seeger mutters into her wristwatch. A keyboard, jammed with strange alphanumerics, lights up the skin of her forearm. She taps a sequence with her other hand. The isolation tent pops softly. Erickson pushes a tentative finger through the membrane, finds it unlocked, and lurches off the table as if passing through a soap bubble. His feet hit the deck with a fleshy slap. His feet hit the deck with a fleshy slap. Nolan holds out a dive skin she's produced from somewhere.
Welcome back, buddy. Told you we'd get you out.
They leave Clark with the corpses. Seeger hauls herself to her feet, ignoring Clark's offered hand and bracing herself against the bulkhead. One hand still clutches protectively at her stomach. She lurches over to Klein.
Norm? Norm?
She squats next to her subordinate, stiff-limbed, and pushes back one of his eyelids.
Stay with me.
Droplets of blood dribble from her scalp and splatter onto the medic's pummeled face, making no difference at all. Seeger curses and wipes the back of her hand across her injury. Clark steps forward to help. Her foot comes down on something small and hard, like a small stone. She lifts her foot. A tooth, sticky with coagulating fluids, clatters softly onto the deck. Clark begins. Seeger turns. Rage simmers on her face.
Just get out of here.
Clark stares at her for a moment. Then she turns on her heel and leaves. Rowan's waiting in the corridor. This can't happen again. Clark leans against the bulkhead to take some weight off her injured leg. You know, Grace, she and Jean are... It's not just Grace. At least it won't be for long. I said something like this might happen. She feels very tired. You said you wanted space between the two sides. So why was Jerry keeping Jean here when he wanted to leave? You think she wanted that man around? She was looking out for the welfare of her patient. That's her job. Our welfare is our own concern. You people simply aren't qualified. Clark raises one preemptive hand. Heard it, Pat. The little people can't see the big picture. Joe Citizen can't handle the truth. The peasants are too ignorant to vote. She shakes her head, disgusted. It's been 5 years, and you're still patting us on the head. Are you saying that Gene Erickson is a more qualified diagnostician than our chief of medicine? I am saying he has the right to be wrong. Clark waves an arm down the corridor. Look, maybe you're right. Maybe he'll come down with gangrene and come crawling back to Jerry inside a week. Or maybe he'd rather die. But it's his decision. This isn't about gangrene, Rowan says softly, and it isn't about some common low-grade infection. And you know it. And I still don't see what difference it makes. I told you. You told me about a bunch of frightened children who can't believe that their own defenses will hold. Well, Pat, the defenses will hold. I'm living proof. We could be drinking Behemoth in pure culture and it wouldn't hurt us. You've lost one more layer of denial. That's all. Behemoth's here, Pat. I don't know how, but there's nothing you can do about it, and why should you even bother? It's not going to do anything except rub your noses in something you'd rather not think about, and you'll adapt to that soon enough. You've done it before. A month from now, you'll have forgotten about it all over again. Then please, Rowan begins, and stops herself. Clark waits while the other woman braces herself, yet again, for the subordinate role. Give us that month, Rowan whispers at last. Really? There are people who pronounce Star Trek as Star Trek? What? I had no idea. I'm not sure I've ever encountered that. That's crazy. I don't doubt that it happens, but because how often are you ever going to see the word Trek? Really? I mean, ever outside of Star Trek, or somebody trekking somewhere, or all the instances in which you'd see this. All I'm saying is the four-letter word TREK is not exactly the word you expect to see. Now, granted, given the context of the series Star Trek, it doesn't make much sense that you'd call it Star Trek, but then again, it's space stuff and nothing really makes sense anyway. We're talking holodecks, we're talking teleporters, we're talking green people and blue people with antennae, so I guess it's understandable, much like Calvary and cavalry are understandable.
That doesn't make them okay.
Oh, I cannot make that noise. I cannot do that with my throat. That tickles. Mm. Boy, I hope I muted it in time to keep the coughs away. Nemesis! Clark doesn't often go into the residential quarter. She doesn't remember ever having been in this particular section. The corridor here is sheathed in lattice paint and wired up to a mural generator. A forest of antlered coral crowds the port bulkhead. Surgeonfish school and swirl to starboard, like the nodes of some abstract and diffuse neural net. A mesh of fractured sunlight dances across everything. Clark can't tell whether the illusion is purely synthetic or powered by archived footage of a real coral reef. She wouldn't even know how to tell the difference. Of all the sea creatures that have made her acquaintance over the years, none have lived in sunlight.
A lot of families along here, Clark figures. Adults don't go in for Why am I having difficulty here? Adults go. Adults don't. There we go. Okay. Adults don't go in for evocations. Evocations? If something's evocative, but you evoke. Evocations of the Wild Kingdom is. Okay. Adults don't go in for evocations of the Wild Kingdom as a rule. It's kind of hard to retain that aesthetic once you've grasped the concept of irony. Let's reread that micro paragraph without the interruptions. My bad. Disadvantages, of course, of me doing this live. A lot of families along here, Clark figures. Adults don't go in for evocations of the Wild Kingdom as a rule. It's kind of hard to retain that aesthetic once you've grasped the concept of irony. Oh, I'm mispronouncing aesthetic. So it's not AE aesthetic, it's ESTHETIC aesthetic, which is different. Don't ask me for the definition because I'm looking it up. One sec. Maybe they are the same. Ah, no, here we go. Aesthetic and poetic. Semiotics. Aesthetic, UK ace. It. What? Wait. No. No. I think he just forgot the A. Never mind. Because I'm looking at aesthetic and poetic, which is something in semiotics. The study of signs to describe perceptive and productive levels, processes, and analyses of symbolic forms. The corresponding terms for the processes are aesthesis and poiesis. That doesn't actually tell me what aesthetic is, though. Does it? Cool. Thanks, Wikipedia. Not exactly the best source of information. Anyway, the point being made by this paragraph, which I'm going to repeat for the last time, because frag has been thrown by a spelling. A lot of families along here, Clark figures. Adults don't go in for evocations of the Wild Kingdom as a rule. It's kind of hard to retain that aesthetic once you've grasped the concept of irony. In this case, it's referring to the fact that they live in a bubble under the sea. Also, that most of the Wild Kingdom has been killed off in this particular timeline at this point. We've pretty much taken the ecosystem and done horrible things to it. Done the kind of things to it that Achilles Desjardins would like to do to another human being. Okay. Here it is, D18. She taps the doorbell. A muffled musical chime drifts through the closed hatch, a reedy thread of music, a faint voice, the sounds of motion. The hatch swings open. A stocky girl of about 10 looks out at her from under spiky blonde bangs. The music wafts around her from the interior of the compartment. Lex's flute, Clark realizes. The smile dies on the girl's face the instant she lays eyes on Lenny Clark. "Hi," Lenny Clark says. "I was looking for Alex." She tries a smile of her own on for size. It doesn't fit. The girl takes a stumbling step backward. "Lex?" The music stops. "What? Who is it?" The blonde girl steps aside, nervous as a cat. Alex Rowan sits blinded on a couch in the center of the room. One of her hands lowers the flute. The other reaches up to the mother-of-pearl phones covering her eyes. "Hey, Lex," Clark says. Your mom said you'd be here." "Lenny, you passed." "Passed?"
Quarantine. They said you and Psycho Man were locked up for tests or something. I guess you aced them. So ordinarily I'd be using like a little British girl voice or something. But first of all, that's kind of hard to do for me right now. And second of all, she's been educated at some place that wasn't in a British school, so she doesn't sound like her mum, who's actually Canadian, so shouldn't actually have a British accent anyway, but we're doing it anyway. So y'all are just gonna have to deal with this stream of consciousness crap. Now I have to repeat the line because I can't actually remember what it was. I really should have few of these. I was about to call them transgressions, interjections. Quarantine. They said you and Psycho Man were locked up for tests or something. I guess you aced them. A wheeled rectangular pedestal about a meter high squats in front of the couch, a little obelisk with the same opalescent finish as Alex's headset. Alex sets her phones down on top of it, next to an identical pair already at rest. Clark limps into the room. Alex's face clouds instantly. What happened to your leg? Rogue squid. Rudder got me. Alex's friend mutters something from the corner of Clark's eye and disappears into the corridor. Clark turns in her wake. Your friend doesn't like me much. Alex waves a dismissive hand. Kelly spooks easy. One look and she just flash feeds all the shit her mom ever spewed about you guys. She's nice, but she doesn't high grade her sources at all. I'm gonna work on the. I have to keep from like my gut wants to descend into like Valley Girl, and I have to resist that urge. The girl shrugs, dismissing the subject. So what's up? You know that quarantine I was buzzing on about a while back? Alex frowns. That guy that got bitten, Erickson. Yeah, well, it looks like he came down with something after all, and the basic thumbnail is we've decided to invoke a kind of no fish heads policy in Atlantis for the time being. You're letting them kick you out? Actually, I think it's a good idea, Clark admits. Why? What's he got? Clark shakes her head. It's not really a medical thing, although that's part of it. It's just feelings are running kind of high right now on both sides. Your mom and I thought it'd be better if your guys and our guys kept out of each other's way, just for a while. How come? What's going on? Your mom didn't. It belatedly occurs to Clark that Patricia Rowan might have opted to keep certain things from her daughter. For that matter, she doesn't even know how much of Atlantis's adult population has been brought up to speed. Corpses aren't keen on full disclosure, just as a matter of general principle. Not that Lenny Clark gives a great crimson turd about corpse sensibilities. Still, she doesn't want to get in between Pat and Lenny? Alex is staring at her, brow furrowed. She's one of the very few people to whom Clark She's one of the very few people to whom Clark can comfortably show her naked eyes. Right now, though, Clark's glad her caps are in. She takes a couple of paces across the carpet. Another facet of the pedestal comes into view. Some kind of control panel runs in a strip just below its upper edge, a band of dark perspex twinkling with red and blue icons. A luminous jagged waveform, like an EEG, scrolls horizontally along its length. What's this? Clark asks, seizing on the diversion. It's far too big to be any kind of game interface. That? Oh, Alex shrugs. That's Kelly's. It's a head cheese. What? You know, a smart gel. Neuron culture with. I know what it is, Lex. I guess I'm surprised to see one here after. Want to see it? Alex taps a brief tattoo on the top of the cabinet. The nacreous substance swirls briefly and clears. Beneath the newly transparent facade, a slab of pinkish gray tissue sits within its circular rim like a bowl of fleshy oatmeal. Flecks of brown glass punctuate the pudding in neat, perforated lines. It's not very big, Alex says. Way smaller than the ones they had back in the old days. Kelly says it's about the same as a cat.
So it's evil, at least, if not hugely intelligent. What's it for? Clark wonders. Surely they wouldn't be stupid enough to use these things after.
It's a kind of pet, Alex says apologetically. She calls it Rumble.
A pet?
Sure, it thinks, sort of. It learns to do stuff, even if no one really knows how exactly.
Oh, so you heard about that, did you?
It's a lot smaller than the ones that, worked for you. They didn't work. It's really harmless. It's not hooked into life support or anything.
So what does it do? You teach it tricks? The porridge of brains glistens like an oozing sore.
Kind of. It talks back if you say stuff to it. Doesn't always make a lot of sense, but that's what makes it fun. And if you tweak the audio feed right, it plays these really cool color patterns in time to music.
Alex grabs her flute off the couch, gestures at the iPhones.
Wanna see?
A pet, Clark murmurs. You bloody corpses.
We're not, Alex says sharply. Not all of us.
Sorry? Not what?
Corpses. What does that mean, anyway? My mom? Me?
Did I say that out loud? Just corporate types, I guess. She's never spent much time pondering the origin of the term, any more than she's lost sleep over the etiology of chair or fumarole.
Well, in case you didn't notice, there's a lot of other people in here. Crunchers and doctors and just families.
Yeah, I know. Of course I know.
But you just lump us all together. If we don't have a bunch of pipes in our chest, we're all just corpses as far as you're concerned.
Well, sorry. And then, belatedly defensive, I'm not slagging you. It's just a word.
Yeah, well, it's not just a word to all you fish heads.
Sorry, Clark says again. A distance seems to open between them, although neither has moved. Anyway, she says after a while, I just wanted you to know I won't be inside for a while. We can still talk, of course, but... Movement from the hatchway. A large, stocky man steps into the compartment, dark hair combed back, eyebrows knotted together, his whole body a telegraph of leashed hostility. Kelly's father. Miss Clark, he says evenly. Her guts tighten into a hard, angry knot. She knows that look. She knows that stance. She saw it herself more times than she could count when she was Kelly's age. She knows what fathers do. She knows what hers did. But she's not a little girl anymore, and Kelly's dad looks very much in need of a lesson. But she has to keep reminding herself. None of it happened. And with that, we are going to call it for the day. Thanks to everybody who done tuned in. I appreciate it. Things were a little rougher than I'd like, but basically my voice is more or less recovered. Sort of, kind of, a little bit, basically. For lack of a better term, recovered. So, yeah, barring some massive relapse out of absolutely nowhere, we should be good to go for the next several weeks. Speaking of weeks, let me look at my schedule. Yeah? Where's my schedule? There's my schedule. Hello, schedule. Okay, so I'm assuming 4 more. So 26, second, 9. Yeah, okay, so we'll be done mid-June. Oh, shoot. That timing actually might work out flawlessly because I am absent. I am gone the last week of June, first week of July. I should be back by the end of the week for July. Should. So tentative. That actually works out beautifully. So basically July 7th probably.
I'll be able to start on the last volume, last installment of the Southern Reach slash Area X trilogy. So that one's for you, person who left the comment. I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to wait a month. What about Calgary or Ontario reference to the mountain? Oh God, that Quebec. So this is some goofitude. Saint Louis du Haha. So this is a joke. It's not really a joke. This is a real place. Like I'm not. Okay. So the name of the place referenced was. Come on. Where are we? Oh geez, I don't know what page it was on. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? I don't know what page it was on. Sugar. I should have marked the page it was on. Schmat. So schmat. So schmat. So it's. Okay. So there was a place in Canada, and I was reminded of it based on the location of the mountain, which I'm trying to find. And it's in Quebec, and it is called Saint Louis du Haha. That's with an exclamation point after each ha. Um, so where to start? Um, excuse me. Um, there was kind of like running jokes. Haha, it's a place in Quebec, so it's HAHA as opposed to if it was Spanish. Um, this is not telling me the joke associated with Saint Louis du Haha, but part of the joke was that they that's where they put all the loony bin people, because you'd laugh, haha, because you were crazy. Let me see if it's at the beginning of this chapter. I think it was at the beginning of a chapter. Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Or was that? No, 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 no. That was with the portrait of a. Okay, so that's actually the next chapter along. One sec. Here we go. Mont Saint Hilaire. So I get these confused. One sec. I'm dropping things. So setting aside, so Mont Saint Hilaire. The reason I know about it is because I knew a guy who is really into UFOs, and there was a period of time back in like the 80s, I think, when people were seeing lots and lots. And this is Mont Saint Hilaire. This is the place referenced in the book. Um, People saw like a bunch of UFO stuff, like a bunch of UFO spottings. And so, like a running joke was, "Oh, you saw the UFOs up at Mont Saint Hilaire. Sounds like you should probably go to Saint Louis du Haha." Um, it it doesn't mean that the joke was good. Just you know that it was there. But hey, St. Louis du Ha, I think won a Guinness Book of World Records for having the most exclamation points uh, in a town name, which is spelled, by the way, Saint Louis, Louis, du Ha exclamation point, ha exclamation point. Like show. Did that really just shoot it to Twitch and nowhere else? Nice. How do I fix that? Uh, sick. I don't know how to fix that. Just trust me. There's hyphens between all of them, except for the ha's. There's no hyphen between the ha's. I goofed. And then there's Mont Saint Hilaire, which is, gosh, it's in southern Quebec, right? Maybe not. Where is that? I've been by there. Uh, ages ago, of course. Um, where is it? It's 30 kilometers east of Montreal, so not really. Anyway, um, this awful kind of pathetic aside, which was part of a funny joke. Oh, hey, there it is. Thank you. I don't know why my text won't let me send it to both Twitch and YouTube. I have no idea. I honestly don't know. Can I do get reply? This interface isn't working according to the way I thought it was supposed to work. That's the one. Let's see what that does. Oh, it's not even going to send it. Cool. Neat. Anyway, just a goofy little anecdote from the past of Frag. Distant past. I don't think Mont Saint Hilaire. I don't think anybody's doing like talking about UFO stuff from there now. That feels like an 80s phenomenon in my memory, but maybe that's continued into the modern era. Cool, I guess. Anyway, I'm gonna go. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. I do this every week now that I'm not sick. Starting at about noon Eastern Standard Time. I do these live to anyone who is watching this after the fact. But they all get sent to the YouTube. I knew I forgot something. I forgot to. Good work. I forgot to make the playlist. I'll take care of that this weekend, I guess. Anyway, I do these live, so that's why they're really rough around the edges, and I'm too lazy to go back and edit them. So there. Yeah. So feel free to tune into those. There may or may not be changes to my schedule where I get more reading streams in. I keep talking about that, but it hasn't happened yet. I'll make it clear when it does. The sickness. Normally, I try to tell people at least one stream ahead of time that this is, or 1 week ahead of time. Okay, this is not going to be happening on X week, or I'm not going to be around or whatever. But I wasn't able to last week because I got sick fairly quickly, and then didn't really have the juice to be like I'm going. I mean, like I had really bad uh, what's the light sensitivity. So I would like if I looked at a moving image or even a static image on a screen, like I'd get very quickly. I'd get nasty like eye tension and headaches. It was really bad. So I couldn't even sit in front of the. I could have. That's a lie. I absolutely could have taken the time to be like, oh hey, I'm not going to do one this week. Sorry guys, see you next week. But I didn't because I was feeling like Drek. Laughing like a French jackhammer. A Jacques Hammer? Could be. Could be. I like that my comment section is making jokes. This is good. This is good. This is a good sign. I am losing the plot today. I'm just completely out of it. Still on the mend. Basically recovered. I feel human. Thank God. So yeah, to anyone else who's gotten that particular bug where not only, well, I got a sore throat, but having just like your head is gunked up, it's draining into your lungs, you have a sore throat, you're getting like hot and cold flashes. Wasn't a flu because I didn't have the joint pain, but man, I know one guy who had symptoms that presented as, or I was talking to a guy who had symptoms that presented with like conjunctivitis, and I'm very glad I didn't get that. Um, but yeah, to anyone who had that, geez, man, I wanted to die. Like I was like, I, I don't know exactly how long this is gonna take to get over. About a week, um, which was what the guy told me. He's like, man, I was sick for a week, but then you start getting better, and it's like, okay, good. I'm like, I don't know if I can go the week. I feel like crap. I haven't been that sick in a hot minute. I've not been that sick in a while. Um, Not something I care to repeat. So stay safe out there, folks. If you have a bunch of masks stored around, probably a good idea to wear them when out in public, because I didn't, and here I am a week later, wishing I had. Anyway, that'll do it. Stay safe. Stay sane. Be toasty or cool as per your personal preference. It's getting nice and toasty in many places, and then dipping down into the 30s at night for some reason, and then getting back into the 80s, and then 30s Fahrenheit. Oh, wife was sick for 3 weeks. Yuck. Yuck. I'm glad I didn't have that. I just, yeah, it wasn't great. Haven't turned on news yet, so still have sense of humor. Oh, don't jump. Excuse me. Don't jump that on me. Oh, sorry. Dying on stream. That was good. Oh, boy. Oh. Good times. We have fun here, don't we? We have fun. Alrighty. With that, I'm going to go. Thanks again. It does mean a lot. And again, my profound apologies to Weavatron Observatory. It'll still be about a month before I get to Acceptance by Jeff Vandermeer. I'm sorry. Um, that's just like I had this brilliant, beautiful brain plan where I was like, he's got these two trilogies, and I'm gonna trade books. I'm gonna do one book of the first trilogy, then the first book of the second trilogy, then the second book of the first trilogy, then the second book of the second trilogy, then the third book of the first trilogy, then the last book of the second trilogy, then the last book of the first trilogy, because of course the first trilogy is actually 4 separate volumes because publishers. So that's it. That's why. Sorry. That's why. Alrighty. So yeah, if you are willing to be patient, Weavatron Observatory for one more month. It'll be good. I'm excited for Acceptance as well. Acceptance is a trip. That one's gonna be fun. I'll be able to really push my chops in terms of there's a bunch of good character stuff I can do there. Is that how your brain sounds? Yikes! Trust me, my brain Only when I'm channeling. God, don't say that. People will think you actually have problems. Uh, no. Sometimes my brain does sound like that when it isn't going squish. No, I don't have. I'm not otherkin. Sorry, folks. Sorry to anyone who thought that was a thing. No, sorry. No comment. Alrighty, see you all later. Bye. Hopefully with a voice that is half an octave higher, or with more range that can go for slightly longer. Itchy. See you all later. Bye. Well, yeah, see. It's a visual medium. I'm looking at text. Yes, I see you all later. That is how it works. Yes, excellent. Proceeding to click